Now, a leaked Home Office report shows police have been advised to ramp up recording non-crime hate incidents. This despite public orders to stop over free speech concerns.
Now, the review was ordered by the Home Secretary, and in the report it claims that, of two-tier policing. These are dismissed, as well as far-right extremist narrative. Prime Minister says his main priority is to keep Brits safe.
When it comes to extremism, it's very important that we are focused on the threat so we can deploy our resource properly, and therefore we're looking carefully at where the key challenges are. Obviously that's now informed with what I said last week in the aftermath of the Southport murders, where we've got the additional challenge, I think, of a sort of cohort of loners who are extreme, and they need to be factored in. So that's the focus. In the end, what this comes down to is safety and security of people across the United Kingdom, and that's my number one focus.
Strange report, leaked ahead of time, that seems to be suggesting people who even argue that there may have, in the history of the United Kingdom, been two-tiered policing, that police might have treated some groups differently from other groups. Apparently that makes you far right, according to this report. But joining us now for more is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, this is a bit of an embarrassing moment for the government.
Yes, it really is. They want to talk about growth, their number one mission, but that is being derailed today by this leaked report. Now, worth saying that it was commissioned by the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, in August, following the riots that followed those horrific Southport murders. The Home Office called it a rapid analytical sprint, and it was carried out by officials within the Home Office. Now, it hasn't been published. We don't know if it ever will be. The government are saying that they are rejecting the findings, but there's several of them that are very striking. Its remit was to work out how to better counter extremism, and it's made 38 recommendations. Now, among the things it says, which I think are controversial, it says that claims of two-tier policing are an extreme right-wing narrative. It talks about the grooming gangs, or rape gangs, let's call them what they are, and it says that right-wing extremists, quote, frequently exploit the rape gangs scandal, which it describes as alleged group-based sexual abuse. I think the word alleged is quite something, given that we know many people have gone to jail for this, many more potentially still walking around who maybe should go to jail. So really nothing alleged about this. But they say that the far right use this to promote anti-Muslim sentiment. And finally, it urges that the police record more non-crime hate incidents. Now, that's something that the last government had pushed back on, that said that the police should only be recording these if there was a serious risk of harm. That frankly, the police are very, very stretched, not having a great record of solving actual crimes, and shouldn't really be involved in delving into things that are not even crimes. So I think not surprising that the Home Office are now pushing back on this, but I think it does raise real questions about the sort of mindset of some of the people working within the Home Office. Worth saying that the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, has raised an urgent question. So the Home Secretary, or somebody from the Home Office, will be summoned to Parliament this afternoon. We'll hopefully hear a lot more about what exactly is behind this report and some of those quite controversial findings.
Yeah, I mean, it is extraordinary when you put it in black and white there. It's in the same report, it says group-based sexual abuse is alleged, rape gangs are alleged, and on the other hand, non-crime hate incidents should be expanded. That appears to me, from a first reading of it, to be saying, look less at the actual crime and look more at the non-crime. I mean, the government can't accept this, surely.
No, they can't. And I mean, they have said that it has not been formally agreed. And the Security Minister, Dan Jarvis, has gone further than that and absolutely said that they are rejecting these recommendations. But it is quite astonishing, Tom, as you say, that non-crime hate incidents, it wants to see more of those. But the rape gangs, where we know that dozens of people have gone to jail, it's talking about this sexual abuse as being alleged, quite extraordinary, and judging by the comments from GBNews viewers, has absolutely gone down like a ton of bricks. The Conservatives, of course, absolutely up in arms, saying that this is totally the wrong approach. Certainly, some of what it's talking about, extremism isn't limited, is it, to people who are Islamists or far right. You have people who are extremist, misogynist, for example, environmental extremists, and so on and so forth. But I think that some of the things within this report really will be very worrying to many people.
Well, Catherine Forster, thanks so much for that overview, live from Westminster, of course.
Well, joining us now is security expert Professor Anthony Glees. Professor, I'm listening to this report and I'm thinking, especially with the non-crime hate incidents, how are they going to police all of this? Because remember what happened to Hamza Yusuf? He changed the rules in Scotland, and suddenly, in terms of hate crime, and he was then the most reported person to the police because of it. Then the police were inundated, thousands of people contacting the police. How is this even possible to do any of this stuff that this report is implying that should be done?
No, it's all complete nonsense, I'm afraid, and the government is tying itself up in knots, trying to, dissociate itself from a report that the Home Office itself produced. And I think the idea that there should be these kind of prevent policies on anything other than the prevention of violent extremism, the prevention of terrorism, would be completely ridiculous. So people are allowed to have extreme views. We may not like them. The people you showed in your film barging into that play in the West End and spoiling an evening out for people. These people should be dealt with severely. There's no doubt about it. But they're not terrorists. They're not killing people like Axel Rutagabana was. And I'm also totally mystified by the fact that the Prime Minister continues to make the point that there is a new category of lone wolf that the law needs to be changed in order to track. It is time, really, to talk about this in the correct light. Yes, Sakir is right to say we need to focus resources on the real threat of violent extremism and terrorism. That's right. And so that means all these other things are chaff and can be basically ignored. But he then goes on to say there's this new terrorist issue of lone wolf extremism. Well, we've had lone wolves for ages. And in my opinion, I can't look into the Prime Minister's mind, but in my opinion, all this is coming out of a refusal to accept that whether or not Rutagabana was an Islamist when he carried out those appalling atrocities in Southport, we can't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. But it was clear that there was sufficient evidence to suspect that he might be on the fateful interview that never took place on the 26th of April 2021. Remember, he was referred 3 times to the Prevent cops. 3 times they refused to look into him. But by the 26th of April, there was clear evidence from the schools, who were doing their job admirably, that he was downloading Islamist material, had a history of violence and knives. And what did the counter-terrorist cops do, the Prevent cops do? They didn't go and interview him. So that would have been the stage to catch him.
And those will be huge questions for the inquiry, no doubt. But Anthony, I want to get you just finally on one other point in our limited time, and this is what the report refers to as 2-tier policing, as if anyone who says that the police might behave towards one group differently to how they behave to another group, as if that is a signifier that there is extremism in your worldview. So if you say the way that the police responded to the Black Lives Matter protests during COVID was different from the way that the police responded to the Sarah Everard vigil during COVID, if you point out that difference, you're an extremist.
Oh, you're far right.
I mean, what mindset are the people who are writing this report living in?
Well, of course, serious problems of judgment. But remember, Robin Simcox, the Commissioner for Preventing Extremism, went to Southport quite recently and said the main purpose of his job was to prevent racism. No, the main purpose of his job is to prevent terror attacks and see that prevent. After all, the clue is in the name. It's meant to prevent terror attacks. It's not meant to combat racism or any of these other things. What there needs to be is a proper clean out of all the people, and I have to say, a man like Robin Simcox was appointed by the previous Conservative government. So you need to look at all these people. They're entertaining some ridiculous ideas. I don't blame them for thinking blue skies thinking. They didn't intend this report to be leaked, but they have shown serious errors of judgment. And, you know, when a pointy-headed professor gets something seriously wrong, you smile politely, but you never ask him to speak to you again. And in the case of Home Office officials, the same should apply. There's a serious problem out there, and instead people are ticking boxes, worrying their little heads over whether it's ideology or not ideology. I mean, for goodness sake, you know, you can be a professor of politics and not know if ideology is coming. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it needs to be treated like a duck. We need more common sense in Britain. And I actually think people of this country are totally fed up with not being allowed to say this word and that word, and it's Islamophobic and alleged and this.
Listen, we're running out of time, but it's so good to hear your views. That's security expert Professor Anthony Glees.
Who we would never call a pointy-headed professor.
No, it's not pointed, it's rounded.
His head is screwed on like a proper professor.
Well, but he's right, though, isn't he?
Yeah.
With spending time on definitions and does this go into that and does that go to... Just get on with it. We actually have enough laws. We've got enough. We've got everything, all the scope we need to catch these people. The problem here is the joined-up thinking between the departments, the schools, all the different things around prevent. They're not talking to each other, and people are falling through the...
It's clear that this inquiry will find things could have been done with current powers that exist today and that simply weren't done.